Hello, and welcome to Horror Drift Stories. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel in the dark. If you enjoy slow, eerie stories that stay with you long after they end, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell. And a little note before we begin. You might notice a few short ads in the first 10 minutes. After that, it's completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights, and let's drift into the darkness. Story 1. I know this is going to sound cliché, but this story did not happen to me. If I'm being honest, I probably would not even be thinking about it right now if I had not met up with some friends a few days ago, and someone had not brought up the road in conversation. The story itself is not full of jump scares or dramatic horror movie moments. It is actually pretty quiet, but maybe that is what makes it stay with me. It is not just some random tale passed around online by strangers. It came from someone I know well, someone I trust, and what makes it worse is that her father tells the exact same story. He swears it happened too. That is the part that gets under my skin. The road is what people around here call a 5-mile stretch of highway between two small towns near my hometown. If you looked at it on a map, it would seem completely ordinary. Just another bit of pavement connecting one place to another. No huge cliffs, no abandoned houses, no dark tunnels cutting through a mountain. Nothing about it should feel special. And yet, for as long as I can remember, people have talked about it in a certain way. Not loudly, not like it is some famous haunted landmark, but in that quiet local way that makes things feel more real. The kind of way people talk when they do not need to convince outsiders. They only need to warn the people already around them. The first time I ever heard anything strange about that road was years ago, when I was driving home for Christmas. At that point in my life, I had lived about 700 miles away from my hometown for most of my adult years. I had put a lot of distance between myself and my family, not because of one big dramatic reason, but because distance is sometimes easier than trying to fix old relationships. For a long time, the only person from my family I stayed in steady contact with was my little brother. We always got along better than the rest of us did, maybe because we had survived the same house in different ways. That year, though, I was trying to reconnect, or at least make the effort. I decided I would go home for Christmas, and because I had never done such a long drive before, my little brother flew out to the city where I was living. He stayed with me for a few days, and then we made the drive back together. The plan was simple. We would leave early, take turns driving, stop only when we had to, and get there by late afternoon. On paper, it was supposed to take about 12 hours. That meant if we left at 5 in the morning, we could make it home by 5 in the evening. Maybe a little later if traffic got annoying. Nothing too bad. But road trips do not care about your plans. At some point during the drive, there was a landslide on one of the roads ahead, and everything started changing after that. The ETA kept getting pushed back over and over again. Every time we thought we had made up time, another delay showed up. By 10 that night, we were still about 60 miles away, with 2 towns left to pass before we got home. My brother had been driving for the last couple of hours by then, and he was tired. We stopped at a gas station, filled up, stretched our legs, and switched places. I took the wheel. It was one of those late-night moments that always feel slightly unreal. The gas station lights were too bright. The air outside was cold. Everything around us felt empty in that way roads do. Once it gets late enough, even normal things start to look a little strange when the world is mostly dark and you are already tired. Still, I did not think much of it. We got back on the road, and after we passed through the first town, we started heading toward the second one. That was when my brother said something that at first sounded like normal advice. Go slow here, he told me. The curves are bad, and animals can jump out in front of you without warning. That part made sense. Roads like that can be dangerous at night, especially when they twist a lot and cut through open land or wooded areas. Then he added, in a completely casual tone, also, if you see someone on the side of the road trying to get you to stop, don't. I remember glancing at him, confused. Why not? It was kind of a dumb question. Honestly, it was late at night, and picking up hitchhikers is not exactly a smart move under the best circumstances. Still, something about the way he said it made it feel less like practical advice and more like a warning about something specific. He looked out the window and said, as calmly as if he were reminding me to use my turn signal, because they're not real. I nearly hit the brakes right then. I turned to look at him so fast, I probably took my eyes off the road longer than I should have. What did you just say? He looked back at me like I was the weird one. What? He said. Everyone knows that. I stared at him. He went on, still sounding completely unbothered. This road is famous for it. Seeing people that are not really there. Weird things on the side of the road. People in black, stuff like that. How do you not know this? I thought you liked horror. That irritated me a little because it felt exactly like the kind of thing a younger brother says when he knows he has found the perfect way to mess with you. I like horror, I told him, from the safety of my own home, with tea, a blanket, and headphones. Not like this. He laughed. That made me feel slightly better. So I said, okay, so you're screwing with me, right? I'm laughing, he said, but I'm not screwing with you. This is a real thing people talk about. I've even seen it a couple of times. I snorted. No, you haven't. Believe what you want, he said. Just don't stop if you see anything. I kept waiting for him to admit it was a joke. He never did. And the annoying part is, I did not see anything that night. No strange people, no shadows, no ghostly figures trying to wave me down from the side of the road. Nothing at all happened. We got home around 45 minutes later, tired and stiff from the drive, and after a day or two, I stopped thinking about what he had said. Eventually, I forgot the whole thing. I did not think about the road again for almost 2 years. About a year after that Christmas trip, I moved back home. My father's kidneys were failing, and he needed more care than anyone wanted to admit at first. The idea of being 700 miles away while his health kept getting worse started to feel selfish in a way I could not ignore. So I moved back. 3 months after I returned, I met a woman who changed my life. She was funny, smart, and the kind of person who somehow made everything around her feel warmer. We started dating, and things got serious pretty quickly. Her family was originally from one of the towns connected by the road. Actually, the first town my brother and I had passed through that night. That detail did not seem important at first. It only became important later, when I heard the story. We had gone to visit one of her relatives for a birthday party. It was her cousin's son's first birthday, so the whole thing had that loud, crowded family party energy. There was barbecue smoking in the yard, beer in coolers, children running around screaming, folding chairs set up everywhere, and at least 3 conversations happening at any given time about things nobody outside the family would care about. At some point, a few of us drifted away from the main crowd, and ended up sitting in a quieter corner. The conversation started out random, just one of those loose group talks where nobody is really aiming at anything specific. Then it slowly moved toward travel and road trips. Because my girlfriend and I liked adventure biking and had a habit of telling stories about bad timing, road changes, and getting lost in places we definitely should not have been. That reminded me of the landslide story, so I brought it up. I talked about that Christmas trip, about how the landslide had pushed us way off schedule, and how my brother had warned me about that 5-mile stretch of road and told me people saw things there. One of the cousins' husbands laughed right away. "Oh, come on," he said. "That's just superstition." My girlfriend's cousin looked at him immediately. "No, it isn't," she said. "If you drive between those towns often enough, you know something is wrong with that road." He rolled his eyes a little. "People are gullible." "It's real, honey," she said. "I know, because it happened to me." He gave her the kind of look spouses give each other when they have had the same argument before. "Oh, sure. No, seriously," she said, and there was something in her face that made the whole group get quieter. I remember it clearly. I was about 15, and this didn't happen at night either. That's what gets me. It was in the middle of the day, around 2 in the afternoon. Bright sun, no fog, no rain, nothing spooky, just daytime. That got my attention immediately. People can explain away a lot of things at night. Tired eyes, shadows, imagination. But daylight is harder to argue with. She took a sip of her beer, leaned back a little, and started telling the story. She said that when she was 15, she had been on vacation from school and tagging along with her dad while he worked. He had a pickup truck and was making some kind of delivery, a sound system for a party or event, and they needed to take that road between the towns. They were coming up on a big curve, maybe a couple of miles before the gas station. That sits near the end of that stretch. If you know the road, apparently you know the curve. I did not know it well enough back then, but everyone else there seemed to. As they came around it, they saw a girl walking along the side of the road. She looked to be maybe 16 or 17 years old. She was wearing a blue top and gray jeans. According to my girlfriend's cousin, the girl looked tired. Not dramatic, not bloody, not dirty, not anything obviously alarming. Just tired, like someone who had been walking for a while and needed help. Her dad pulled the truck over and asked if she was okay. The girl said she needed to call her mother and let her know where she was, so her dad offered her his phone. At first, the girl seemed a little nervous, which honestly makes sense. A teenage girl alone on the side of the road would not automatically trust a strange man pulling over. But his daughter was in the passenger seat, and maybe that helped. Maybe it made him seem safe enough. So the girl took the phone. My girlfriend's cousin said she heard the whole conversation. The girl spoke to her mother, and on the other end, her mother sounded relieved and upset at the same time. She said things like, "We were so worried," and "We're coming to get you." The girl told her where she was. They said, "I love you," and "See you soon," and then hung up. At that point, her father offered to drive her to the gas station so she could wait there for her mother. The girl agreed. From where they had picked her up, the drive to the gas station was only about 2 minutes. During those 2 minutes, the girl barely said anything. She seemed exhausted, almost like she was about to fall asleep. But the part that stood out most to my girlfriend's cousin was that the girl was sweating heavily. Not a little. Not like normal nerves or heat. She said it looked like the girl had been soaked in water and then dressed again. That detail bothered her because the day had not even been hot It had actually been cool. Still, they got to the gas station, and her father offered to stay there with the girl until her parents arrived. The girl said no. She told them she would be okay. She said she was safe now. She thanked them. Then they left. That should have been the end of it. They went on with their day, finished the deliveries, and headed home as evening came in. Nothing about the rest of the day sounded unusual. Nothing happened on the drive back. Nothing followed them home. No dramatic sign appeared out of nowhere to prove something supernatural had taken place. Then, the 7 o'clock news came on. This was the part where my girlfriend's cousin had to stop for a second before continuing. Even at the party, telling the story years later, she started breathing differently, like her body still remembered before her mind could finish the words. She said the news report was about a missing 17-year-old girl. That girl had just been found near a creek behind the gas station. She was wearing a blue top and gray jeans. The moment the report started, my girlfriend's cousin knew. She knew before the photo even appeared on the screen. It was the same girl. According to the report, the girl had been missing for nearly a day. She had been killed and left by that creek earlier that morning. That meant that when my girlfriend's cousin and her father saw her walking on the side of the road, stopped to help her, gave her a phone, and drove her to the gas station, the girl had already been dead for around 5 hours. When she said that, the whole little group sitting there went quiet. Some people looked openly uncomfortable. Others tried to pretend they were not bothered. But you could feel the mood change. The air felt heavier somehow, not because there was proof exactly, but because of how ordinary the story sounded. She was not dressing it up. She was not trying to scare anyone. If anything, that made it worse. Finally, she said, "I don't care if you believe me. It happened. My dad was there. Ask him if you want. But it happened. I slept with the lights on for weeks after that. And honestly, once someone says that in that tone, there is not much clever skepticism left to offer without sounding rude. Still, I needed to know. Later, I asked her father about it, not in an accusing way, more in a quiet, private way. I just wanted to hear what he would say without his daughter around to influence him. He told the same story, not a similar version, the same story. Same road, same girl, same blue top, same gray jeans, same phone call, same gas station, same evening news. And he added one detail his daughter had not emphasized as much. He said that the moment the girl got into the truck, he felt a wave of sadness so strong it almost made him sick. Not fear, not panic, just overwhelming sadness. He also said he felt cold, deeply cold, in a way that did not match the weather at all. He could not explain it then, and he still could not explain it now. They never found the person who killed that girl. That part stuck with me too. Because ghost stories are one thing. They are scary, yes, but they also create a kind of distance, a shape in the road, a strange figure, a warning not to stop. Those belong to folklore. But an actual murdered girl, one whose body was found behind a gas station, turns the whole thing into something else. It becomes tragedy first, haunting second. That is probably why the story stayed with me more than I realized. I do not drive that road often. In fact, I avoid it when I can. I tell myself it is just habit, that there are other ways to get where I need to go, and that I do not feel like dealing with those curves. Sometimes I even believe myself. It is not that I sit around constantly thinking about that story. Most of the time, I do not. Days pass. Weeks pass. Life gets busy. I forget. But then someone mentions that stretch of road, or I see the turnoff for it, or I hear one of those casual local comments that make no sense to outsiders. And I remember. I remember my brother's voice in the car that Christmas night, calm as ever, saying, "If you see someone trying to get you to stop, don't." I remember the way my girlfriend's cousin looked when she told her story, like part of her was still in that truck at 15 years old, still hearing that girl say she just needed to call her mom. And I remember her father saying that he felt cold and unbearably sad the moment she got in. I do not know what happened on that road. Maybe there is an explanation for all of it. Maybe grief and fear do strange things to memory. Maybe places collect stories the same way old houses collect dust, until everything feels haunted, whether it is or not. Maybe local legends grow around bad things because people need a shape for horror. Maybe that is all this is. But I am not fully convinced, because there is something deeply human, almost animal, about the instinct to avoid certain places. Sometimes, your mind does not need proof. Sometimes your body hears a story once and quietly decides, no, not there. That is how I feel about that 5-mile stretch. I rarely think of it directly, but I still go out of my way to avoid it, even in broad daylight. Especially in broad daylight, maybe, because I think night gives you excuses. Daylight doesn't. Story 2. This happened to me about 3 weeks ago, on a snowy Saturday morning that started out like any other winter day. A fresh layer of snow had fallen overnight, smooth and untouched, covering the ground like a white blanket. The trees, the trail, the bushes, even the fallen branches, all looked softer under it. Everything felt quiet and still in the way only a snowy morning can. It should have been peaceful. It should have been one of those walks that clears your head and helps you breathe easier. I have always liked walking through the woods alone. It is something I have done for years. Whenever I feel stressed, angry, or overwhelmed, there is something about being deep in the forest with no one around, hearing only your own footsteps and your own breathing, that makes life feel simpler for a while. Out there, away from phones, traffic, and people, it is easier to think, easier to calm down, easier to feel like yourself again. That morning, I expected my walk to be no different. Even now, I still go into the woods sometimes, but it does not feel the same anymore. Since that day, the silence out there feels different. It no longer feels peaceful. It feels watchful. Where I live, the woods are part of black bear country. We do not have grizzlies, but there are plenty of black bears around, especially in the more remote areas. Because of that, I always stay alert on the trail. Black bears usually avoid people, and most of the time they run off if they hear you coming. But you do not want to surprise one at close range. That is the kind of mistake you only get to make once. So, as usual, I made a little noise while I walked. Nothing dramatic, just enough sound from my boots, my breathing, and the occasional cough or word to myself, so that any animal nearby would know I was there. At first, everything seemed normal. The trail was half covered in fresh snow, though you could still make out the shape of the path winding through the woods. The air was freezing enough to sting inside my nose when I inhaled. My boots sank into the snow with that dry, packed crunch you only get when the temperature drops low enough. The trees stood tall and dark against all the white, and the branches overhead held thick clumps of snow that looked like they could fall at any second. Not long into the walk, I began to notice footprints. At first, I did not think much of them. Other people used the trail sometimes, especially on weekends, so seeing footprints was not strange by itself. But as I kept walking, I realized there were more of them than usual, and they did not behave like normal footprints. These were not neat tracks going in one direction, or even a couple of hikers passing through. They were everywhere. They wandered off the trail and disappeared into the trees, then came back again. They crossed over themselves. They looped around. Some seemed to circle in place for no reason. Others went off into the woods and then suddenly returned at a different angle, as if whoever made them had been pacing, wandering, or searching for something. It looked less like someone hiking and more like someone aimlessly moving back and forth for a long time. I remember slowing down a little when I noticed that. There was something unsettling about it, even then. Still, I told myself it could mean anything. Maybe someone had been out there with a dog. Maybe a hunter had wandered off the trail. Maybe a group of teenagers had been messing around. The woods can make ordinary things look strange, especially in snow, when every track stands out so sharply. So I kept going. Further along the trail, there is a steep section that drops down into a gorge. I know that part well. The path narrows there, and the ground slopes enough that you have to watch your footing, especially in winter. The trees grow thicker around the gorge, and sound seems to carry strangely in that area. Even on a calm day, everything you hear feels closer than it really is. I made my way down slowly, listening to the snow crack and crunch under my boots. Crunch, crunch, crunch. That steady sound had become almost soothing by that point. The morning was still and cold, and aside from my footsteps, the whole forest felt silent. After a while, I decided to stop and rest for a moment. The second I stopped walking, I heard something else, another set of footsteps. At first, I thought maybe it was an echo, but no. These were separate from mine, distinct, coming from somewhere off the trail. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I went still and listened. The footsteps were not on the main path. They were somewhere in the woods beside me, moving through the snow. Slowly at first, then a little more directly. I remember thinking that the rhythm sounded wrong for an animal, not because it was too loud, but because it was too even. Animal movement in snow tends to sound irregular, faster, lighter in some places, heavier in others. This sounded human, a person taking careful steps through the trees. I stood there listening for what felt like a full minute. The sound kept getting closer. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It was coming toward me. The closer it got, the more certain I became that whoever it was had been moving directly in my direction, not wandering, not passing by, not crossing somewhere farther off. Coming to me. Then the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. For a moment, the whole world felt frozen. I could hear my own breathing. I could feel my heart starting to beat harder. I looked toward the trees, but the woods were thick and full of shadows between the trunks. I could not see anyone. Finally, I called out, "Hello." No answer. Then, without warning, the footsteps exploded into motion. Whoever it was came charging up the side of the gorge toward me through the snow. The steps were fast, heavy, desperate, crashing through brush and powder, as if they had been waiting for me to speak. That was the moment real fear hit me. I did not stop to think. I did not try to look. My body made the choice before my mind did. I turned and ran back the way I had come. I ran as hard as I could up the trail, my boots slipping and pounding through the snow. My lungs burned almost immediately. I could hear the other person behind me. I did not know how close they were, and I was too afraid to look back. Every instinct in me screamed not to turn around. Then I heard a sound from behind me that I still cannot forget. A deep, guttural roar. It did not sound fully human. That was the worst part. It sounded like a person trying to make an animal noise and putting everything they had into it. It echoed through the trees behind me, raw and ugly and full of rage. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up instantly. I ran harder. The chase could not have lasted more than 5 minutes. But when you are terrified, time stretches into something else. Every second feels longer than it should. Every breath feels like it takes forever. My legs started to ache, my chest hurt, and I could feel myself beginning to lose energy. But I kept forcing myself forward, because I was convinced that if I slowed down for even 1 second, whoever was behind me would be on top of me. Eventually, I realized I could no longer hear footsteps. The roaring was gone too. At first, I did not trust it. I kept running longer than I probably needed to, too scared to believe it had stopped. But after another stretch of trail, when all I could hear was my own breathing and the crunch of my boots, I finally slowed down. I bent over, gasping for air, and listened. Nothing. No footsteps, no crashing through the trees, no roar. A huge wave of relief hit me then. My whole body shook with it. I remember thinking, maybe I had scared whoever it was off. Maybe they had just been trying to mess with me. Maybe they had slipped, or gotten tired, or decided the chase was not worth it. I told myself it was over. I was wrong. I started making my way back toward my house, still shaken, but trying to stay calm. The trail from there leads more or less in the direction of home, and I just wanted to get out of the woods as fast as possible. I was still breathing hard when I rounded a stretch of the path and looked ahead. About 10 meters in front of me stood a man. He was wearing a bear suit, not a real bear skin, at least not as far as I could tell. It looked like some kind of costume or heavy fur suit with a bear head covering his face. In his hand, resting casually like it belonged there, was a fire axe. I stopped so suddenly that I nearly slipped. The man just stood there in the trail, blocking it completely, staring right at me. I cannot properly explain how wrong the sight of him felt. A man in a bear suit in the middle of the snowy woods would have been unsettling enough by itself. A man in a bear suit holding an axe and standing directly in your path after you have just been chased through the forest is something else entirely. It felt planned. It felt deliberate. It felt like he had known exactly where I would end up. He moved slowly from side to side across the trail, almost casually, swinging the axe in one hand before letting it rest on his shoulder. He looked calm, too calm, like he had all the time in the world. I stood there trying to think. I could turn around and go back the other way, but the thought of heading deeper back into the woods, away from home, while he was out there somewhere, made my stomach drop. He could follow me. He could circle around me again. He might have wanted that. I could step off the trail and try to go around him through the trees, but that would mean fighting through deep snow and thick woods with no clear route. It would take forever, and I could easily get turned around. Worse, he had an axe, and if he decided to come after me off the trail, I would be slower in the snow. The more I looked, the more I felt trapped. My only real option, the only one that seemed possible in that moment, was to try to get close enough to slip past him somehow, and then run. So I started moving. Slowly, every step felt wrong. My body was tense from head to toe. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. The man kept staring at me through the bear head. I could not see his face. I could not read his expression. All I had was that awful fixed animal face pointed in my direction. I kept inching forward, trying not to make any sudden movements, trying to judge the space between him and the edge of the trail. Then, Suddenly, he swung the axe at me. The blade cut through the air so close that I felt it. It missed me by what could not have been more than an inch. I jumped back on instinct, and then ran. The man lunged at me as I tried to bolt past him. I felt a hand clamp around my ankle and yank. I screamed and went down hard, twisting awkwardly in the snow. Before he could get a better grip, I kicked wildly and managed to hit his hand. He lost hold for half a second, and that half second was enough. I scrambled back to my feet and ran. I do not even remember how I got home. I remember slipping, stumbling, nearly falling more than once. I remember looking over my shoulder and not seeing him. I remember every shadow in the trees, looking like the shape of that bear head. I remember reaching my house barely able to breathe and slamming the door behind me so hard the walls shook. I locked every door, closed every blind, checked every window. I told myself I was safe. That night, I barely slept. The next day was worse. I woke in the middle of the night, though even now I cannot say for sure what woke me. Maybe it was a sound. Maybe it was one of those moments when your body senses something before your mind catches up. All I know is that I opened my eyes into the darkness and immediately felt that something was wrong. I stayed still in bed, staring at the ceiling. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl from outside. My whole body went cold. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. There he was. The bear man stood outside my bedroom window, staring in at me, the fire axe hanging from one hand. Even through the glass and darkness, I could tell he was looking straight at me. I screamed and jerked backward across the bed. The next few seconds happened so fast, they still blur together in my mind. The man lifted the axe and brought it down into the window. Glass shattered inward. Cold night air rushed into the room. Then an arm came through the broken window and grabbed me by the shirt. He started dragging me toward the opening. I can still remember the sight of that bare face close to me, frozen in that horrible animal grin. The costume made it look like the thing was enjoying itself, like it was smiling while it pulled me toward broken glass and darkness. I panicked and grabbed the first thing I could find. A broken shard of glass had landed on the bed beside me. I snatched it up and drove it into his arm as hard as I could. He made a sound then, a sharp yelp of pain that sounded unmistakably human beneath everything else. His arm recoiled, and his grip on my shirt loosened enough for me to tear free. I jumped off the bed, grabbed my phone, and ran into the corner of the room furthest from the window. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone, but I managed to call 911. I do not know exactly how long it took for the police to arrive. It felt like forever. I stayed pressed into that corner, staring at the broken window, expecting him to come through at any second. I could hear movement outside, then silence, then distant noises I could not place. Every second dragged. When the police got there, they found axe marks all over the outside of the house and around the broken window. But the man himself was gone. He had vanished. Later, the police followed footprints back through the woods. Those tracks led them to a tent hidden out there, as if he had been living in the forest the whole time. Inside the tent, they found tools, old food wrappers, and things no one should ever have to see. There were the remains of dogs and cats in various stages of decay, mutilated and scattered around the camp. Some of the remains appeared to have been eaten. The police believed he had been surviving mostly on stray animals. That thought made me sick. It also made everything much worse, because it meant he had not just been some random person passing through the trail. He had been out there for a while, living there, watching people, watching the area, maybe even learning who came through those woods and when. But the most disturbing thing was what they did not find. They did not find him. The footprints led to the camp and then ended. There were no clear tracks leaving it, no sign of where he went next. It was as if he had simply disappeared. I know that sounds impossible, but that is exactly what I was told. For all I know, he is still out there somewhere, maybe hiding in another camp deeper in the woods, maybe watching the trails, maybe waiting for someone else to walk alone through fresh snow on a quiet morning, thinking the forest is empty. That is the part I cannot shake. Before this happened, the woods felt like a place where I could go to clear my head. Now, whenever I hear snow crunch under my boots, I remember that second set of footsteps answering mine. Whenever I stop walking, I think about how the sound got closer only after I stood still. Whenever I see animal tracks or torn branches or strange movement between the trees, I think of that man in the bear suit, standing in the trail with an axe on his shoulder, blocking the only clear way home. And at night, I still wake up sometimes and stare at the window, half expecting to see that face outside the glass again. So believe me when I say this, be careful out there. Do not assume a quiet trail means you are alone. Do not assume the only dangerous thing in bear country is a bear. And if you ever notice footprints in the snow that do not make sense, tracks that wander in and out of the woods like someone has been circling and waiting, do not ignore them the way I did. Turn around, go home, and do it before whatever made them decides to follow you. Story 3. I have always felt more awake when the rest of the world is asleep. Daylight never made much sense to me. It always felt too loud, too busy, like everything was moving too fast for me to understand. But at night, things slow down, the noise fades, and the world feels quieter, almost like it's holding its breath. That's when I feel like I can actually think. That's why I took the night shift job at a place called the Rusty Anchor. It was a 24-hour diner sitting in a rough, forgotten corner of Gary, Indiana, surrounded by old factories and steel mills that never seemed to stop working. Even at night, you could hear the distant clanging of metal, like something massive was being built or destroyed far away. The air always smelled heavy, like old grease mixed with rust and smoke. The diner itself felt old, not in a cozy, welcoming way, but in a tired, worn-out way, the kind of place that had seen too much and just kept going anyway. The floors were slightly sticky no matter how often they were cleaned, and the lights buzzed constantly, like they were struggling to stay on. The people who worked there didn't feel much different from the place. There was old Pete, who had probably been working there longer than I had been alive. His skin looked rough and dry, like leather that had been left out in the sun for years. He barely spoke unless he had something to say, and even then, his voice sounded like it hurt him to use it. Then there was me, a college dropout, with no real direction, trying to make sense of life while pouring coffee for strangers at 3 a.m. Most nights were quiet. Sometimes a trucker would stop by, or someone who looked like they didn't want to go home. To pass the time, Pete and I would talk, mostly stories. Weird ones. The kind that sound fake, but feel just real enough to make you uncomfortable. We talked about truck drivers who disappeared on the highway and were never found again. About strange shapes seen moving between the factories late at night. And about the freezer in the back of the diner, where some people claimed a woman in white could sometimes be seen, standing perfectly still. I never really believed any of it. Not completely, anyway. It was just something to make the long nights pass. One night, there was a bad storm. The sky had turned a strange purple color, and the rain was hitting the windows so hard it sounded like someone throwing gravel at the glass. The diner was completely empty, and the whole place felt colder than usual. Pete leaned over the counter and looked at me in a way he normally didn't. Serious. Focused. "You ever hear of the hashslinger?" he asked. I laughed without thinking. "You mean that cartoon thing? The hash-slinging slasher?" "Come on, Pete." But he didn't laugh. He didn't even react. He just kept staring out the window at the empty parking lot. "That name didn't start there," he said quietly. "They changed it, made it into a joke, but it wasn't always one." Something about the way he said it made me stop smiling. He told me about a man named Elias Vane. Back in the 1950s, Elias was known as one of the fastest cooks around. He worked in a diner just like ours, flipping burgers faster than anyone else. People came just to watch him work. Then, one night, something went wrong. A machine in the kitchen, an old meat grinder, broke while he was using it. It didn't just injure him, it tore his arm off all the way up to his elbow. The owner of the diner didn't care. No insurance, no help. Elias lost his job while he was still in the hospital. According to Pete, Elias came back a week later, but he wasn't the same. He had done something to himself. He had taken a heavy metal spatula and somehow attached it directly to what was left of his arm. Not like a normal tool, like it had become part of him. He didn't come back to ask for his job. He came back for something else. "A final order," Pete said. Then he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "You'll know when he's coming." The lights start to flicker. The phone rings, but nobody's there. And the walls, he paused. They start to sweat. Not water, something else, something that smells wrong. I laughed it off. I told myself it was just another story. It had to be. But after that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. 2 weeks later, Pete didn't show up. That alone was strange. Pete never missed work, ever. He was the kind of person who would show up no matter what. But that night, it was just me. The diner felt emptier than usual. The silence felt heavier. Even the neon sign outside sounded louder, buzzing constantly like an angry insect. Around 3 in the morning, something changed. It wasn't obvious at first. It was more like a feeling. The air became thick, like it was pressing against me. My ears popped, like I was going down in an airplane. I looked at the clock. The second hand wasn't moving properly. It kept twitching back and forth, like it couldn't decide which direction to go. Then the lights started flickering, not randomly, in a pattern. On, off, pause, on, off. It felt almost like a heartbeat. I told myself it was just bad wiring. The building was old. That made sense. But when I looked outside, everything was completely still. No wind. The puddles in the parking lot looked like dark mirrors. That's when I heard the phone ring. It came from the old payphone near the restrooms. I hadn't heard it ring even once since I started working there. I wasn't even sure it still worked. I walked toward it slowly. The floor felt strange under my feet, softer than it should have been. I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" At first, there was just static, a soft, distant noise, like waves far away. Then, I heard something else, a wet, heavy sound, like metal hitting something soft, again and again. I felt my throat tighten. "Who is this?" I asked. Then I heard a voice, not through the phone. It felt like it was inside my head. Order for Vane. I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely move. I turned toward the kitchen, trying to think clearly, trying to tell myself none of this was real. Then I saw the walls. The white tiles were leaking something dark. Thick green liquid was slowly oozing out from between them. It didn't drip like water. It moved slowly, like it was alive. The smell hit me next. It was horrible, like metal, rot, and something burnt, all mixed together. I backed away, trying not to panic. Then I saw something outside. A bus. It didn't make sense. There were no buses that came through that area at that time. It looked old, really old, like something from another time. Its paint was faded and dirty, and the windows were so covered in grime you couldn't see inside. It rolled into the parking lot without making a sound. The doors opened slowly, and something stepped out. He was tall, too tall. He had to bend slightly just to get through the doorway of the bus. He was wearing a chef's hat that looked stained and worn out, and his uniform was covered in layers of old stains. He walked in a strange way, slow, heavy, like something was dragging. His arm, it wasn't normal. One arm ended in a stump, and sticking out of it was a large metal spatula. Not clean, not new, rusted and sharp, like it had been used for something terrible. He walked into the diner. I grabbed a knife without thinking. "Stay back," I shouted. He didn't react. He just kept moving. He went straight to the grill. Then he dragged the metal spatula across it. The sound was unbearable, loud and sharp, like metal screaming against metal. He turned his head toward me. Where his eyes should have been, there was nothing. Just empty, damaged skin. "Shift, change," he said. That's when I understood. He wasn't there to kill me. He was there to replace me. The diner around me began to disappear. Everything faded into something else. A massive, endless kitchen filled with grills and smoke and heat. I looked down at my hand. It was changing, the skin turning pale. Tight. Wrong. Pain shot through my wrist, like something was cutting through it slowly. I screamed and tried to fight back, but it didn't matter. He touched my chest with that cold metal arm, and everything went black. When I woke up, it was morning. Everything looked normal again. I told myself it had just been a dream. But then I saw the trail on the floor, that same dark green substance leading to the grill. And on the counter, there was something sitting there, a rusted spatula, attached to what looked like part of a human bone. I left that job the same day. I moved away, started over somewhere else, tried to forget everything, but it hasn't stopped. Every night at 3, the lights flicker. Sometimes my phone rings, and when I answer, I hear that same sound. Metal hitting something soft. And now, there's something new. A small mark on my wrist. Round, deep, like something is being prepared. Like something is coming back. And this time, I don't think I'm waking up. Story 4. I have never liked spiders. Even the small ones make my skin crawl. I know not every spider is dangerous, and I know most of them want nothing to do with people, but that has never mattered to me. The second I see one, my whole body goes tense. My stomach tightens. My eyes lock on it like if I look away for 1 second, it will vanish and reappear on my shoulder. Still, for most of my life, I did not kill them. That was because of my mother. From the time I was little, she taught me that bugs should not be harmed just because they wandered into our house. Her rule was simple. If a creature came inside, you caught it carefully, and put it back outside without hurting it. No stomping, no spraying, no smashing with a shoe. You used a cup and a piece of paper, trapped the bug gently, then carried it out and let it go near a bush or patch of grass. That was the proper way to handle an unwanted guest, according to her. My dad never cared that much. If my mom was not around, he probably would have crushed a bug with whatever was closest to him and moved on with his day. But when she was home, he played along. He would shrug, grab a cup, and do it her way. I did the same, at first because I had to, and later because it became a habit so deeply drilled into me that I almost felt guilty at the thought of killing one. The only problem was that my mother's kindness extended to spiders too. That was something I never truly accepted. I still remember one day from when I was a kid. I saw a black widow in the house. Just seeing that shiny black body and the thin legs hanging in the web made my blood run cold. I froze in place and stared at it like it was a tiny bomb with legs. It did not move. It just sat there quietly in its web. But my imagination did the rest for me. I knew, logically, that it was not going to leap across the room and attack me. I knew spiders do not look at humans as giant meals they can feed on for years. But fear is not logical. Fear does not care what you know. Fear just takes over. Then my mother came in, saw the spider, and without a trace of worry, she picked it up with her bare hands. She held that black widow like it was some harmless little bead of dust, carried it outside, and placed it gently in the garden. Then she came back in, smiling as if she had just done something completely normal. "See," she said, "nothing to worry about. It's more afraid of you than you are of it." I remember staring at her and thinking my mother had lost her mind. She was a sweet woman, no question. Kind, patient, soft-spoken, the type of person who apologized to furniture after bumping into it. But when it came to spiders, I thought she was absolutely insane. If one of those things had bitten her, we would have been rushing to the emergency room, while she still tried to tell us it did not mean any harm. I never understood her love for them. I never came close to understanding it. But I still followed her rules. That is what parents do sometimes. They plant habits in you so early that by the time you are old enough to question them, they are already part of who you are. After college, I moved out to Los Angeles. It was my first time living alone, and my apartment was a small one-bedroom on the third floor of an older building that came with all the joys of city living. The place was not terrible, but it definitely had its share of unwanted visitors. Moths turned up around lights. Roaches showed up in the kitchen now and then. Once I found some weird long-legged bug in the bathtub and decided I did not even want to know what it was called. Even then, I still handled them the way my mother taught me. Every time I saw some creepy little thing in the bathroom or the kitchen, I would hear her voice in the back of my head. "It's more afraid of you than you are of it." So I would sigh, go get a cup and whatever flat object was nearby, and carry the bug outside. Usually, I dumped them into a bush near the building entrance, and then walked all the way back up to my apartment. It was annoying. It was time-consuming. But habits like that are hard to break. And honestly, with all the things that showed up in that apartment, I was mostly just grateful that I had not run into a spider. That changed several months ago. It was a Monday morning in winter. I woke up around 7 like I always did for work, hungover and miserable after a night out doing karaoke. My mouth was dry. My head felt like someone had packed it with sand. I shuffled into the bathroom, half awake, turned on the shower, and hoped the steam would somehow fix my entire life. It did not. After the shower, I was drying off and reaching into the bathroom cabinet for painkillers when I saw it. A huntsman spider. It was sitting there among the pill bottles, like it paid rent. It was not huge at that point, maybe about an inch long, but that was more than enough for me. Its legs spread out like bent twigs from a dead tree. Its body was flat, its shape wrong in that special spider way that makes your brain reject what your eyes are seeing. And its eyes, God, its eyes, seemed fixed on me in a way that made it feel less like I had discovered it, and more like it had been waiting for me to open that cabinet. I jerked backward so hard I nearly fell into the door. "Nope," I whispered. I left the bathroom immediately, pulled on pants, grabbed a cup from the kitchen, found a folder on the counter, and went back determined to deal with it before I lost my nerve. The cabinet was still open. The spider was gone. My stomach dropped. Now it was moving around somewhere in my bathroom. I stood outside the doorway and scanned the room like I was clearing a crime scene. Sink, toilet, walls, ceiling, tub, nothing. I checked the floor near the shower where I had dropped my clothes. My shirt and sweatpants were still in a damp heap where I had left them. With the folder in one shaky hand, I reached down and poked the pile. The spider exploded out of it. It ran straight up the folder toward my hand. I screamed and flung the folder across the room so hard it bounced off the wall. Shit! 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 I took another step. It moved again. I crept closer and closer until I was finally near enough to trap it. Then I froze. I could not do it. All I could picture was the spider suddenly darting sideways, or dropping, or jumping onto my arm. My heart was hammering so hard it felt painful. Sweat ran down the side of my face. I am a grown man, and there I was in my bathroom, too scared to place a cup over a 1-inch spider. After a few seconds, I gave up. I set the cup down, grabbed my toothbrush and toothpaste, and backed out of the room. "Fine," I muttered. "You win. You can stay there for now, but when I come back, you're gone." The spider did not respond, of course. It just stayed on the wall, staring in that awful spider way that somehow feels smug, even though that is impossible. I finished getting ready elsewhere and left for work. When I came home that evening, the spider was gone. I searched the bathroom, then the bedroom, then the kitchen corners and ceilings. Nothing. No spider. No web. No sign it had ever been there at all. Over the next week, life went back to normal. I stopped thinking about it. No new webs appeared. No spider sightings happened. Slowly, the fear faded. I figured it had found some crack or vent and left, and that was the end of it. What I did not notice right away was that something else had changed too. The other bugs were gone. The roaches that used to appear every now and then stopped showing up. The moths disappeared. The random bathroom creatures vanished. My apartment was suddenly almost unnaturally free of insects. At the time, I thought it was a blessing. Looking back, the math is embarrassingly simple. Spider comes into apartment. I fail to remove spider. Spider handles pest control. For a lot of people, that would probably sound like a fair trade. Keep one spider, lose the roaches. Problem solved. I should have seen it as a warning. I should have moved out right then. Spring came. One morning, sunlight slipped through my blinds and woke me up slowly. I lay there for a moment, still half asleep, when I noticed something unusual. A smell, warm, salty, buttery. Something was cooking. My eyes snapped open. I sat up in bed with my heart pounding. My first thought was that I had somehow left the stove on. and my apartment was about to catch fire. I jumped out of bed and ran to the kitchen, already thinking about the fire extinguisher under the sink. There was no fire. There was something on the stove, and hanging from the ceiling above it was the huntsman spider. Except it was not 1 inch long anymore. It was enormous, at least 15 inches across, maybe more if you counted the full stretch of the legs. Thick brown hairs covered its body. It hung from a web attached to the ceiling with 2 of its back legs, while several others worked over the stove. 1 leg held a spatula. Another steadied the pan. It was cooking. I stopped so suddenly my body almost forgot how to move. The spider slowly turned toward me. Its upper body lifted. 8 black eyes locked onto mine. Its fangs curled slightly upward. Then all at once, its legs began twitching and waving with quick, excited movements, like it was thrilled to see me. I could not run. I could not scream. I could barely breathe. Then it spoke, in a soft, high little voice. It said, "Breakfast is ready." That is the point where my brain gave up. I fainted. When I woke up, I was sitting at my dining table. A plate had been placed in front of me. On it sat a grilled cheese sandwich. A very good-looking grilled cheese sandwich. The bread was golden and evenly toasted. Butter shone on the surface. Melted cheese stretched at the edges. Chopped green herbs were sprinkled on top like garnish. It smelled incredible, which only made the situation more horrifying, because I was sitting across from a giant spider that had apparently cooked me breakfast and possibly carried my unconscious body to the table afterward. The huntsman hung from a strand near the ceiling, staring at me. I stared back. For a long time, neither of us moved. Finally, it asked, "Are you hurt?" "What?" I croaked. It repeated, slower this time, "Are you hurt?" I don't think so," I said. One of its long legs reached down and nudged the plate toward me. "Eat," it said. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. But another, weaker, more confused part of me was too shocked to function. My hand moved almost on its own. I picked up the sandwich and took a careful bite. It was incredible. I hate admitting that, but it is the truth. It was the best grilled cheese I had ever eaten. The bread was crisp and buttery, with just the right amount of salt. The cheese was thick, rich, and perfectly melted. It tasted like several kinds had been used together, each one adding something to the flavor. Sharp, creamy, savory, all at once. It was absurd. It was terrifying. It was delicious. I ate the entire thing in 4 bites while the spider watched me. When I finished, it asked, "How was it?" I was too confused to lie. "Good," I said. The spider suddenly shook with wild excitement, all its legs moving at once in a frantic little celebration. I nearly had another heart attack. Then it lifted several legs into the air and proudly announced, "The secret ingredient is cheese." I just sat there in silence. "I will make more," it said, and scrambled back toward the stove. That was enough to jolt me into action. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "No, actually, I need to go to work," I said. The spider paused and rubbed its little feelers together as if thinking. "Sunday," it said. "Great. It knows the days of the week," I thought. "That's right," I said, lying through my teeth. "I work Sundays too." I grabbed my bag, my keys, and ran out of that apartment still wearing my pajamas and no shoes. I flew down those stairs so fast, I am pretty sure I broke some law of physics. Once outside, I called the building management office. I told the woman on the phone that I had a massive spider problem and needed someone in my apartment immediately. She asked when I first noticed the spider. I said, right now, right this second, and that I needed my apartment basically bombed. She calmly informed me that maintenance did not work Sundays, and that someone could spray the unit on Monday around noon. I lost my mind. I told her it was not just one spider. It was huge, more than a foot wide. I may have shouted that I did not own cups big enough for Bigfoot-sized spiders. She was not impressed. When I finally blurted out, "It talks," she hung up on me. I spent the rest of the day at a friend's house. When my friend asked why I had shown up in pajamas, looking like I had seen a ghost, I told the truth. A giant huntsman spider had made me grilled cheese and talked to me. My friend laughed so hard he nearly choked. No one believed me. So I waited for Monday. By the time I returned to my apartment, it was after 1 in the afternoon. I had received an email saying maintenance had gone in and sprayed the unit twice. Even standing outside the door, keys in hand, I felt sick. I had no idea if spray would work on something like that, or if they had even seen it. I opened the door slowly. The apartment looked normal. Too normal. I stepped inside carefully and kept the door wide open behind me. No spider on the ceiling, no legs poking out from behind the couch, no strange webbing. Then I started noticing other things. My bed was made. The dishes were washed. Dust was gone from the shelves. Laundry that had been sitting in a pile for days had been cleaned, folded, and put away. The whole place looked better than it had when I moved in. I stood there staring, trying to make sense of it. Maintenance had not done this. No apartment crew comes in to spray for pests and then folds your underwear. Something had been in my home. Something was still in my home. Welcome home. The voice came from above me. I froze so completely, it felt like my bones had turned to stone. I looked up. The huntsman was on the wall near the ceiling, climbing toward me with a quick tapping clatter of legs. It smelled weirdly pleasant, like flowers. Its hair stuck out in all directions. Its feelers rubbed together happily. "How was work?" it asked. I swallowed hard. "Work." It waited. "Oh, right. Work. It was fine. Busy." It made a clicking sound that genuinely seemed like a laugh. "That is lovely to hear," it said. Then it crawled to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, took out ingredients, grabbed a glass from the cabinet, and poured juice into it. "Drink," it said. "I will make lunch." I should have run. I know that. I looked around and saw a broom near the closet. For one brief moment, I imagined grabbing it and beating the thing until it stopped moving. But then, I looked at the apartment again, the clean dishes, the folded clothes, the made bed. This thing, whatever it was, had not attacked me. It had cooked for me, cleaned for me, welcomed me home. And that grilled cheese had been unbelievably good. So instead of fighting or running, I sat down. I asked if it had been the one to make my bed and do my laundry. "Yes," it said. "How did you learn to do all this?" "Cooking too." It set another grilled cheese in front of me and answered, "I saw it on TV." That made no sense, but in that moment, I was too tired and too scared to argue. I thanked it for the food and the cleaning. Then, it said something that somehow surprised me even more. "No, thank you." I looked up. "For what?" "You did not evict me," it said. "I will be a good roommate." "Roommate?" I repeated. "Yes. I cannot pay you, but I can help with bugs, chores, and food." I just stared. This giant spider wanted to live with me. It had a name, too. When I awkwardly tried explaining that I was not looking for a roommate, it interrupted and said, "Mary, what?" "That is my name, Mary." Of course it had a name. Of course the giant spider that cooked grilled cheese and did laundry had a name. I tried to tell Mary that this was not going to work, that I did not have room, that I was not looking for a roommate, that I appreciated the chores and the food, but could not possibly live with a spider the size of a coffee table. Then Mary looked away and quietly said, "You are the first person who did not try to kill me." That stopped me cold. I wanted to say, "Actually, I absolutely wanted you dead the first time I saw you." But it was also true that I had never actually tried. I had frozen. I had delayed. I had run. And because of that, this giant impossible creature had apparently decided I was safe enough to stay with. Mary kept talking, said she had hoped if she did a good enough job, I would let her stay. Said she did not mind cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, taking care of bugs. She sounded sad. I do not know exactly why I said yes in the end. Maybe I felt guilty. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe I was curious. Maybe some broken part of my brain thought that if a giant spider wanted to fold my clothes and make world-class grilled cheese, it could not be all bad. Whatever the reason, I gave in. "I guess you can stay for a little while," I said. Mary lit up instantly, raising several legs into the air in excitement. "Really? You mean it?" I flinched, because the movement was so sudden I thought she might jump on me. "Trial run," I said quickly. "Only for a while. If you don't do your part, you're out." "I won't let you down," she said. Then she rushed back into the kitchen at incredible speed to start on the dishes again, even though there were barely any there. And that is how I ended up with a giant huntsman spider for a roommate. At the time, I told myself it might work out. No more bugs, good food, help with chores. Strange, yes. Terrifying, yes. Completely insane, yes. But maybe manageable. I was wrong. Very, very wrong. But at that point, all I knew was that I had made a second terrible mistake. The first one had been not killing her when I had the chance. Story 5. My parents were never the kind of couple who shouted at each other. They disagreed sometimes, of course. Every married couple does. But they handled it quietly, almost politely, in that very reserved Midwestern way. They were good people, gentle people. Even when they were upset, they usually kept their voices low and their words careful. That is why the one time I heard them really argue has stayed with me for my entire life. I was not supposed to hear it. I was a kid then, homesick with the flu. It was one of those miserable nights where you cannot really sleep, but you are too tired to enjoy being awake. My nose would not stop running. My throat hurt, and every few minutes I had to get up and find another tissue. Still, it did not feel completely terrible, because my mom had bought me a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic book earlier that day. I had wanted it for weeks. At that age, something small like that could turn being sick into an adventure. I remember lying in bed with a fever, reading under the lamp, feeling like I was in my own little world. Sometime close to 2 a.m, after another sneezing fit, I got out of bed and walked toward the bathroom. The house was dark, and the hallway felt colder than usual. That was when I heard voices from the kitchen. Not normal voices. Loud voices. At first, I thought maybe the television was on. Then I realized it was my parents. I stopped in the hallway and listened. I had never heard them sound like that before. My father especially. He was not an angry man. He was calm, even when life was hard. But that night there was anger in his voice, and underneath it, something worse. Fear. "We can't pretend nothing is going to happen," he said. "We can't send him out into the world with no warning." My mother answered him through tears. "So what are you saying? That we tell him now? That we drop this on him while he's still a child? You think it's better for him to grow up afraid of every shadow?" "I think it's better for him to have a life at all," my father snapped. I peeked around the corner just enough to see them. My dad was standing near the sink, his face red, his hands shaking at his sides. I could not tell if he had been crying, but his eyes looked wet. My mother sat at the kitchen table with her face in her hands, her shoulders rising and falling as she tried to breathe through her sobbing. I had seen her cry at sad movies before. I had seen her tear up at funerals and old songs on the radio, but I had never seen her break down like that. After a while, she lowered her hands and looked up at him. "Maybe it stops with us," she said quietly. "Have you thought of that? Maybe this is the end of it. Maybe it goes no farther." My father sat down across from her and took her hands. "And what if it doesn't?" he asked. "What if we say nothing, and then it reaches him with no warning at all?" He looked exhausted when he said it, like a man trying to keep a roof from collapsing with his bare hands. "We do not have to make his whole life about this," he said more softly. "But we cannot leave him in the dark." My mother gave him a long, tired look. "And what exactly are you going to do?" "I'll figure something out," he said. "I promise." Then they just sat there, holding hands across the table in silence. I do not know how long it lasted. At the time, it felt like forever. I crept back to my room before they could see me, and by morning, the whole house felt strange, as if everyone had agreed to pretend the night never happened. The next day, they told me my grandparents had died, both of them, at the same time. They were only in their 60s. I remember that part because it seemed impossibly young to me then. I asked how it happened, but no one gave me a clear answer. Adults spoke in soft voices and moved around the house, like they were afraid to disturb something. My parents looked shocked, but not surprised, and even as a child I could feel the difference. After a while, I stopped thinking about that night. Kids do that. Life keeps moving, school starts again, seasons change, and the strange things adults say fade into the background. Years passed. Then, when I was 28, my parents died. Both of them. On the same day, the call came from a police officer. His voice had that careful official tone people use when they are about to wreck your world. I do not remember much of what he said. I remember sitting down. I remember staring at the wall. I remember hearing the words, but not understanding them at first, because no matter how old you are, some part of you keeps believing your parents are permanent. You know they will die one day, but knowing a thing in theory is not the same as feeling it happen. They were just gone. I was an only child, so there was no brother or sister to call. I spent those first days contacting distant relatives, answering questions, making arrangements, signing papers, paying funeral costs, and accepting condolences from people I had not seen in years. Grief has a strange way of mixing with paperwork. You can be breaking apart inside while discussing death certificates and storage bins. For a while, I was too overwhelmed to really look through what they left behind. It was only some weeks later, while sorting their belongings, that I found a shoebox tucked away among other things that seemed ordinary. It had been sealed carefully with tape. On top of it was a note with my name in my mother's handwriting. Please read. That was all it said. I took the box into the kitchen and turned on the light. My hands were unsteady before I even opened it. Inside were a few papers and several small jars. One of the papers had writing on it, and when I unfolded it, I knew at once that my mother had written it. It said, "If you are reading this, then we have passed on. If it happened before our time, then something likely did this to us. Something we prayed would never come for us. We hoped this would end with us, but in case it does not, we need you to do the following when the day comes. First, light a fire. Second, burn the myrrh. Third, stay by the fire. You will know the day when it comes. Do not go looking for it. It will be plain. The myrrh is the resin in one of the jars. There should be enough for one night. The less you know, the better. We have prayed every night since you were born that this would never happen, but if it does, promise us you will be careful. Light a fire, burn the myrrh, stay by the fire, and please, my most darling boy, stay by the fire." By the time I finished reading it, my eyes had filled with tears. My mother always called me that when I was young, my most darling boy. No one else ever had. I sat there in the kitchen with that paper in my hands, thinking of that one night from my childhood, hearing my parents argue in frightened voices. Suddenly it all came back in sharp detail. I wished I had asked them about it. I wished I had forced them to tell me, but that chance was gone. I stored most of their belongings away over time, but I kept the jars of myrrh in the living room beside the fireplace. I kept the note in a drawer. The words stayed with me. I could repeat them any time without looking. Light a fire. Burn the myrrh. Stay by the fire. At first I spent a lot of time wondering what the day meant. I kept expecting some big sign, something impossible to miss. I worried that my parents had written those instructions for the child they knew, not the adult I had become. What if I missed what they would have understood? What if I saw the sign and dismissed it? But the years passed, and that fear slowly faded into the background. I inherited their house on the edge of a small town in rural South Dakota. It was quiet there, the kind of place where people knew each other's cars and waved from porches. I got a job at the local hardware store and made a little extra money selling things online. It was not glamorous, but it was steady. Life became simple in a way that suited me. I even started seeing someone. Her name was Annette. Things were going well enough that I was thinking about getting a St. Bernard puppy from a local breeder. I had already started getting ready for it, looking at food bowls, dog beds, and toys. My life was not exciting, but it felt normal. And after everything that had happened, normal felt like a gift. Then came the Saturday in late April. The sun was going down, turning the horizon a dusty red. I had fallen asleep on the couch while watching a documentary and woke up when my phone warned me the battery was almost dead. I remember feeling lazy and content. I had lunch planned with Annette the next day and had already laid out a nicer shirt to wear. I had even ironed it, which was rare for me. It felt like life was heading somewhere, slowly, but in a good way. Then I heard someone outside. "Hey," a voice shouted. "I need to talk to you." I did not get many visitors, but I knew most people in town. Without really thinking, I got up and opened the front door. A woman stood there, a few years older than me. I had seen her around town before. I was pretty sure she worked at the flower shop with the strange blue sunflowers in the front window. She had short curly hair, dark eyes, and a face that looked worn down by stress. In her hands was a shotgun. That was the first thing I really noticed. It took me a second to look past the gun and see the pile of broken wood and old boards at her feet. It looked like she had dragged half a smashed chair and some scrap plywood together in front of my house. A little rough bonfire waited to be lit. She looked wild, frightened, and completely sure of herself at the same time. "This is the day, right?" she asked. "This is it." I stared at her. "What day?" Then my brain caught up with the rest of the scene. "Why do you have a shotgun?" "He told me to bring it," she said. "Bring the gun. Go to the easternmost house. Light a fire. Stay by the fire." The words hit me so hard, I almost felt dizzy. "Burn the myrrh," I said before I could stop myself, "and stay by the fire." She frowned. "Myrrh? What do you mean?" Without answering, she bent down and lit her bonfire. It caught with a sudden burst and sent heat rolling toward us. Then she pulled a folding camping chair from a bag, set it down, and sat with a tired sigh. She dropped a bag of marshmallows beside her, as if this were some strange camping trip, instead of whatever it actually was. I went back inside with my heart pounding. I threw logs into the fireplace with shaking hands. I was moving too fast and clumsy, pinching my fingers, getting splinters, nearly dropping the matches. I sprayed on fire starter, struck a handful of matches, and finally the wood flared up with a hard burst of heat. I grabbed one of the jars, opened it, and threw some of the sticky resin into the flames. The smell that rose up was thick and ugly, earthy and bitter, like wet mushrooms and smoke. It filled the room fast. I opened the living room window for air and leaned out toward the woman. "You okay in there?" she called. "I lit it," I said. "Dropped something. What was that stuff you said?" "Myrrh? My parents told me to burn it," I said. "They said it would help." She looked confused. "So you weren't told to come here?" "I live here." That made her pause. Then slowly, we started from the beginning. Her name was Marilyn. She was 4 years older than me. Her father had died on the same day my parents had. In his will, he had left instructions for her. They were similar to mine, but not the same. She had been told to bring a gun, go to the easternmost house, light a fire, and stay by it. We compared what we knew. Our families were from the same general area, though they had lived different lives and done different work. Still, the timing was too exact to ignore. Her father and my parents had died on the same day, and now, for reasons neither of us understood, we had both been set on a path leading to that night. I sat on the windowsill, with one leg hanging outside, the fireplace burning behind me. Marilyn stayed by her bonfire because her instructions had told her to stay by a fire, and she did not want to risk changing the rules. I offered to let her come inside anyway, but she shook her head. She was not taking chances. As the light faded, we talked. I told her about overhearing my parents argue when I was a child. She listened carefully, resting the shotgun across her lap. "My dad had a night like that too," she said after a while, "right after my grandmother died. He stayed up talking to his brother on the phone. I remember hearing him from my room. I never heard him sound like that before. She had a husband and 3 kids, but she had left them out of this on purpose. Whatever this was, she did not want to drag them into it by speaking too openly. So we sat there, half strangers, sharing the most unsettling memories we had of the people we loved. Finally, Marilyn said what we were both thinking. "I think something killed him," she said. "My dad, and my grandmother too." I nodded slowly. "I think something killed my parents, and my grandparents. But why us?" she asked. I looked back at the fire. Maybe it was never supposed to come for them either. That thought stayed with us. When I asked how she knew that day was the day, she went quiet for a moment. Then she told me her father used to sing Three Little Birds to her every night when she was a child. It had been their song, something steady and comforting that belonged only to them. And this morning, she said, staring into the flames, there were 3 dead little birds on my doorstep. Her eyes shone in the firelight, and I knew. I believed her. Hours passed slowly after that. I drank from a small flask of whiskey. Marilyn smoked a cigarette, even though she had quit years ago. The night stayed windless and strangely still, and the fires threw long, nervous shadows over the yard and fields. Around 9 o'clock, I noticed another fire far out across a field, then another. By 10, there were 5 fires in total, scattered in the distance. Other people, others like us. None came near. None crossed the dark to join us. They all kept their place and their flame. Marilyn shouted across the field to one of them, "You staying by the fire?" A voice shouted back something that sounded like yes. That small answer somehow made everything worse. By then, we knew it was real. Near midnight, one of the distant fires flared strangely and then died all at once. Marilyn stood up so fast, her chair tipped backward. "You saw that?" she said. "I had," another voice carried across the dark. Then silence. Later, someone came running toward us from the fields. A pale-faced man, maybe in his 40s, running as if his life depended on it. Maybe it did. I could hear another sound behind him then, a terrible fast pounding like galloping, but wrong somehow, as if there were too many legs striking the ground in the wrong order. The man reached the ditch near my driveway. Something hit him from the dark. He vanished into the brush with a sound I will never forget. A hard, ugly crunch of bones breaking all at once. Then his body came back out, thrown like garbage, leaving blood across my driveway. Marilyn's fire dipped low for one awful second, and when it flared again, the body was gone. The dark around us felt alive after that. We could hear movement near the house, big breathing, thudding steps, something circling just out of sight. Marilyn made a run for the dead man's backpack when she saw it lying near the ditch. I shouted at her to come back. Something huge rushed past so fast I barely saw it, clipping my car hard enough to shove it sideways. Dust and gravel flew. Then it was gone again. Inside the backpack we found notes, cassette tapes, and an old tape player with dead batteries but a working power cord. We tossed the player through the window to me, then the tapes. I plugged it in and turned up the volume so Marilyn could hear from outside. The tape began in the middle of a meeting. Voices, many of them, angry, scared, speaking over one another. As we listened, a picture began to form. Our grandparents had all been connected to some project in the 1970s. Something about communications. An echo. Something they had tried to get rid of. Something that had come back and killed them. Then, somehow, it began reaching for their children too. The meeting on the tape had been our parents trying to make sense of it all. They had gathered every detail they could. Fire, myrrh, guns, wool clothing, cigarettes, alcohol, music, silence. All of it had seemed to change the timing a little, buying minutes here, an hour there. But the only thing that truly mattered, according to their notes, was fire. Those who stayed near a living fire lasted longer. Not forever, just longer. That was why we had been given different instructions. They had not known what truly worked, so they had spread out the attempts. Different children, different rules, hoping someone might survive long enough to understand more. Then I heard my mother's voice on the tape. "This could stop with us," she said. "I won't drag my darling boy into this unless I absolutely must." I had to pause the tape after that. The last fire across the field went out sometime after 1 a.m. Marilyn checked her watch and looked sick. "If the notes were right," she said, "then we have maybe 2 hours left." I threw more myrrh onto the fire, though by then my hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped the jar. Not long after that, the thing came close enough that we could hear it clearly. The steps were uneven, heavy, wrong. It moved like several animals stitched into one shape. Then there was a sharp, strange inhale, and Marilyn's fire began to die. "Inside," I shouted. She turned just as something slammed into the ashes where her fire had been. She fired the shotgun both times, and one blast must have hit something because the creature crashed into the side of the house instead of straight through it. Glass shattered, bricks broke. Marilyn was thrown through my front door and landed hard in the hallway. The house went cold. I could see my breath. I broke the rule then. I ran from the fireplace and dragged her back into the living room toward the light and heat. The thing stopped at the broken doorway, reaching inside with one hand. I still remember that hand better than anything else. Gray skin like old leather, fingers of the wrong lengths, bent the wrong ways, with too many joints and black nails scraping lightly over the wood floor, as if it were searching by touch. It was gentle, almost curious, and somehow that was worse than if it had been violent. It was reaching for Marilyn. I pulled her back a few inches, and the hand withdrew. By then, she was barely conscious. Her arm was clearly broken. Blood ran from her head. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but a black shape spread over the screen, and a high screaming sound came from it. I dropped it. Marilyn mumbled through swollen lips that people on the tape who called for help had died sooner. The thing was not just hunting, it was interfering. The fire began to fail after that. I added wood, fire starter, anything I could think of, but the flames would not catch properly. They shrank and weakened as if the fire itself had forgotten how to burn. I tried lighting the rug, the chair, the curtains, nothing. Outside, or maybe inside the walls, the heavy steps drew near again. I realized then that staying by the fire only mattered if there was still a fire. I was panicking, half mad with fear, when the matches slipped from my hand and landed on the shirt I had laid out for lunch with a net. It was splattered with spilled myrrh and soaked in some of the fire starter I had accidentally sprayed on it earlier. For 1 second, an ember caught, tiny, weak, almost nothing. Then I saw it, a living point of flame. I grabbed the shirt and wrapped it around my hand. I blew on the ember once. Then again, behind me, something huge entered the doorway. I could hear it dragging across the floor. I waved the shirt like a fool, like a desperate man trying to command fire by force of prayer. And then it burst into flame. My whole arm lit up at once. The creature recoiled. For the first time all night, it seemed afraid. I saw only pieces of it in that sudden light. Gray, stretched skin, too many limbs, massive eyes set wrong in its head, or maybe not its head at all. A mouth, or something like one, opening wider than it should have, black liquid hanging from its teeth. I stepped toward it, with my burning arm held out like a torch, and it backed away. It scrambled through the guest room and crashed out the broken window. A second later, I heard it hit the ground outside and flee across the fields in that terrible, uneven gallop. I smothered the flames on my arm and dropped to my knees. My phone screen lit up nearby. The black shape was gone. This time, when I called for help, the line went through. We told the authorities it was a home invasion. That was the only story we could tell without sounding insane. Marilyn agreed that the less said, the better. If knowing too much truly mattered, then silence might still protect the people we loved. We survived that night. Barely. I was burned badly from hand to shoulder. Marilyn had a severe concussion and a broken arm, but we lived. Since then, we have met several times and written down everything we know, carefully and plainly, in case one day our own children need it. We still do not understand all the rules. We do not know why some people are targeted and others are spared. We do not know what our grandparents did, only that whatever followed them did not stay buried. What I do know is this: my parents were right to be afraid. They were right not to tell me too much. And they were right about one thing above all else. When the day comes, you stay by the fire. Any fire. Even if, in the end, you have to become the fire yourself. I have not had another day like that since. Maybe I never will. Maybe it really did end there. I want to believe that. I try to believe that. But some beliefs never settle fully in your bones once fear has lived there long enough. So, if I ever wake up and find 3 dead little birds on my doorstep, I will not waste time asking questions. I will not wait for the dark to explain itself. I will light a fire. I will burn the myrrh, and I will stay by the fire, just like my mother asked. I will be her most darling boy, and I will make it through the night. Story 6. Blake and I had not spoken in almost 17 years. He was 6 years older than me, and growing up, he never let me forget it. He always talked down to me, always treated me like I was some annoying kid trailing behind him. Back then, I thought he was just arrogant and mean. I did not understand him. I did not understand the distance he kept between himself and the rest of us either. But now, after everything that happened, I keep thinking maybe the truth had been there all along. Maybe I was just too blind to see it. When our father died, Blake refused to come to the funeral. He did not even try to hide how he felt. He told our mother over the phone that he wanted nothing to do with it. He shouted at her. He shouted at me too when I tried to talk sense into him. He said I could go to hell right along with them. He said I was pathetic for always taking our parents' side, especially when, according to him, they did not deserve loyalty from either of us. I hated him for that. I was already angry with Blake for leaving home the moment he turned 18. He walked out and never looked back. He left me alone in that house with our mother while her health slowly got worse year after year. I stayed. I took care of her for 10 years. I was 22 when she finally died, and by then I felt hollowed out. Losing both of my parents was like being dropped into a deep pit I could not climb out of. I loved them, whatever flaws they had. I loved them. Their deaths broke something in me. And still, even then, Blake found a way to make it worse. When I called to tell him that our mother had died, he only said she deserved it. I can still hear those words in my head. He did not come to her funeral either. After that, I could barely reach him at all. Maybe that was a good thing, because every time we spoke, it turned into anger and shouting. There was never going to be peace between us. At least that is what I believed back then. Then came the day I went to the lawyer's office to deal with our parents' will, and Blake showed up. The second I saw him, I snapped. I do not mean I got angry. I mean, I completely lost control. I went after him right there in that office, like a man who had been waiting years to explode. I insulted him in every way I could think of. I called him selfish, cruel, disgusting. I asked him how he could treat the people who raised us like garbage. I said our parents had done everything for us, and this was how he repaid them. I put every bit of grief and rage I had into those words. Blake barely reacted. That made it even worse. He stood there and took it, calm and cold, as if I was no more important than background noise. He said he had not come for money. He did not care about the inheritance. There was only one thing he wanted: the house. More specifically, he wanted it sold to someone who would tear it down completely. He said he wanted that filthy place erased from the earth. That was the final straw. I attacked him. We got into a violent fight right there in the lawyer's office. It was ugly. Furniture got knocked over. Someone called the police. By the end of it, both of us looked like idiots, and I am not proud of any part of it. But that was the last time I saw Blake in person. The house was sold eventually, and after that, he disappeared again. I thought that was it. I thought he was gone from my life for good. Then one day my phone rang. I answered without thinking. I was expecting a package, so I assumed it was a delivery driver or some work call. Instead, I heard a voice I had not heard in years. "Hey, little brother," Blake said. The moment I heard him, it felt like my whole body tightened. It was like the past came rushing back all at once. Everything I thought I had left behind came alive again. In an instant. Old anger, old grief, old questions. Still, I talked to him. Part of me wanted to hang up immediately and tell him to go to hell. But he was my brother. 17 years is a long time. Maybe people change. Maybe time softens things. Maybe enough damage had been done already, and there was no point carrying it forever. So I kept talking. 6 months passed. Blake and I started speaking every week, sometimes longer calls, sometimes just checking in. You could say he had changed, though I am still not sure how much. He sounded calmer, older, less sharp around the edges, but there was still something in him that never quite relaxed. The real shock came when he started talking about our parents. The mother and father I remembered were loving people. To them, I had always been their sweet little Max. They took care of me. They protected me. They loved me. Even when they made mistakes, I never doubted that. In my mind, our home had been decent and stable. Not perfect, but good. Blake remembered a completely different world. At first, I thought he was trying to poison my memories. I thought maybe he was still angry and wanted to drag their names through the dirt even after death. But he kept telling the same stories, with the same terrible certainty. He said they starved him. He said they locked him in the basement for days at a time. He said they tied him up and would not let him use the bathroom, forcing him to lie in his own filth. He said our mother beat him with a leather belt almost every day. He said our father preferred choking him until he blacked out. I did not believe him. Not really. Not until he showed me the scars. During a video call, Blake rolled up his sleeve, then turned the camera to his back and legs. His skin was marked with old lines and raised scars, long pale streaks, like he had been whipped over and over again. Then he held up one hand, close to the camera. One of the joints on his index finger was missing. He said our father cut it off with pruning shears when he was about 10. After that, it became a lot harder to hold on to the version of our parents I had always believed in. Blake was a damaged man. That much was clear. Whether I liked him or not, whether I trusted him fully or not, I could see pain written all over him. If what he said was true, then the people I had loved all my life had turned his childhood into a nightmare. That realization did not only change Blake in my eyes, it changed everything. It shattered the foundation of my own memories. If our parents had done those things to him, how had I never noticed? How could the same people who tucked me in at night and called me their sweet boy have treated my brother like an animal? And the question that kept haunting me most was simple. Why him and not me? Blake and I kept talking after that. We texted almost every day. We called whenever we had time. But strangely, we rarely spoke about our childhood again. It was not because I did not want to. I had 1,000 questions. I wanted dates, details, explanations. I wanted something that could make all of it fit together. But something in me kept holding back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe I did not really want the answers. Maybe I was afraid that asking too much would make the whole thing even worse. There was also another problem. Our parents were dead. The house was gone. There was no one left to confirm anything. No witnesses. No proof besides Blake's scars and his word. And part of me still doubted him. I hated myself for that, but it was true. 17 years had passed. I had no idea what kind of life Blake had lived in all that time. He told me he had spent a while in South Korea. He said he had been married once, had a daughter who was 14 now, and had gotten divorced years ago. He even showed me a picture of the girl. But all of that just made him seem more distant somehow. Like a man who had lived 10 lives while I had stayed trapped in one. What if he was lying? What if the scars came from something else? What if he hated our parents so much that he had built a whole story around it? I could not hide those doubts forever. Eventually, Blake noticed I was acting differently. He asked me directly what was wrong. I decided not to lie. I told him everything. I told him I was trying to believe him but kept getting stuck. I told him I could not understand why our parents would hurt him and never touch me. I told him part of me was afraid he was manipulating me. To my surprise, Blake did not get angry. He did not shout. He did not accuse me of betrayal. He just listened. Then he said he wanted to come see me. That caught me off guard. He told me he had not wanted to worry me before, but he had heart problems now. Serious ones. He said he wanted to see me while he still could only explain face to face. He wanted to tell me why our parents had locked him in the basement and what they had really done to him there, beyond the beatings and torture. I agreed. What else could I do? I was 42 years old and learning that everything I believed about my family might be wrong. I needed the truth, or whatever version of it Blake could give me. He booked a flight for 2 weeks later. He asked just one thing of me: pick him up at the airport. When the day finally came, I was a mess. I had spent days pretending I was calm, but the truth was, I felt like I was being torn apart inside. I was afraid to see Blake again after all those years, afraid of what he might tell me, afraid of what I might have to accept. But mixed in with that fear was something almost childlike: excitement, hope, even. For the first time in our lives, it felt like maybe Blake and I were moving toward each other instead of away. I paced around the apartment all morning. My wife and kids got tired of watching me wear holes in the floor and finally told me to just leave early. So I did. On the drive to the airport, my mind would not stop spinning. What would I say when I saw him? Would we hug? Shake hands? Sit in awkward silence? Would he tell me the truth right away or wait until later? Would hearing it fix anything? Or just destroy more? By the time I got to the airport, I was exhausted from thinking. According to the arrival board, Blake's plane had landed. There had been a delay earlier, but it made it in on time in the end. I stood near the exit and waited, trying to act calm and failing completely. Then I saw him. The angry young man I remembered was gone. In his place was someone much older, worn down by life and time. He was not exactly old, but he looked like someone who had carried too much for too long. The years showed in his face, in the way he moved, in the heaviness around his eyes. He stopped in front of me and said, "Max, it's been a long time, little brother." I thought I might start crying right there in the airport. It hit me that hard. All the years apart, all the anger, all the memories, all the strange closeness we had started rebuilding over the phone. It all crashed into me at once, but I kept it together. I swallowed the emotion, shook his hand, and patted his shoulder. "That's for sure, Blake," I said. I took his bag, and we walked out to the parking lot. The drive started off surprisingly easy. We talked the whole way, mostly about ordinary things. Nothing heavy, nothing about our parents or the past. Just conversation, simple and natural. The kind brothers should have had years ago. Blake seemed calm, careful, softer than I remembered. I kept finding myself thinking that if he had been like this when we were younger, maybe none of those lost years would have happened. Then, after a stretch of quiet, Blake said, "Max, can you take me to our old house now?" I glanced at him. "Right now?" "Yeah," he said, his voice trembling a little. "I just want to get it over with." I nodded, though I felt uneasy. Then I remembered something and cursed under my breath. I told him I had to stop by home first, because I had forgotten my work phone. And it was important. The old house was far away. Adding another stop meant a very long drive, but Blake only nodded and said that was fine, as long as I took him to the house afterward. So I drove home. When I pulled up in front of my apartment building, I jumped out quickly, but Blake stayed in the car. "I'll wait here," he called after me. "You'll be faster without me." That struck me as strange. I told him he could come up. There was an elevator. It would not be a problem. But he shook his head. "No, we'd just waste today." I shrugged and hurried inside. My wife and kids were out, probably buying the cake they had planned for Blake's arrival. I scribbled them a note saying we would be home late, then went into the kitchen to grab my work phone from the counter. That was when my phone rang. I looked down, expecting maybe a work call. It was Blake. For one stupid second, my brain did not process it. I answered while still moving. "Blake, I'm coming. I'll be right there." There was a pause. Then Blake said, sounding tired and confused, "Where?" I frowned. "Down at the car, with you." "Max," he said slowly, "I couldn't come see you. I got sick this morning. I'm at the hospital. I've been trying to call you for hours." I stopped walking. "What?" "I never got on the plane," Blake said. The whole world seemed to tilt. I remember telling him to stop joking. I said he was sitting in my car right now. I said we were about to drive to Mom and Dad's old house. Then his voice changed. It grew urgent, shaky, frightened. "Max, listen to me," he said, and then he coughed hard. "You can't take him back." I felt cold all over. What? More coughing? Something clattered loudly in the background, like a tray or machine being knocked over. "Max," Blake gasped. "My heart, please promise me. Promise me you won't take him back." "He can't go back." Then I heard a heavy thud. I shouted his name into the phone. No answer. Just distant voices, rushing feet, people shouting for help, metal rattling, panic. Then the call ended. By then, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. I ran to the elevator, down to the lobby, and out through the front door. The winter air hit me, but I hardly felt it. I looked toward my car and froze. Blake was sitting inside, still, perfectly still. He was staring out the window with dull, empty eyes. He was not blinking, not moving, just sitting there, as if he had been waiting for me the whole time. For a few seconds, I could not do anything except stare. Then my eyes dropped to his hand. The finger joint was not missing. I stood there in the cold, unable to breathe properly. The phone still in my hand, my real brother's last words echoing in my ears. You can't take him back. He can't go back. In that moment, the truth hit me with a force that made everything else disappear. The man in my car was not Blake. So the question that has been eating me alive ever since is this. If it was not my brother sitting there, then what was it? And why, after all these years, did it want to go back to our old house so badly? Story 7. I knew something was wrong the moment I got there. It was not the kind of feeling you can explain easily. It was just one of those places that makes your skin go cold, even in broad daylight. People always say, trust your gut, trust your instincts, and I used to think that line was overused. Now I do not. Now I know that sometimes your body understands danger long before your mind does. Looking back, I wish I had listened to that feeling the second it showed up. I wish I had refused to come. I wish I had said no and stayed home, where everything was familiar and safe. I am not the kind of person who likes travel. My friends call me the definition of a couch potato, and honestly, I accept that title with pride. I like home. I like routine. I like knowing where everything is. I like quiet evenings, familiar walls, and predictable days. Even the darkness at home feels harmless to me, like something I have made peace with. The living world has always frightened me more than the dead one, if I am being honest. People are strange, cruel, unpredictable. I have always believed in keeping to myself. Do not disturb what you do not want to disturb you. That has always been my rule. Some people mistake that for being calm and unbothered. But the truth is a little less flattering. I am not naturally cool. I am just clueless in a very committed way. I do not go looking for trouble, and I do not go looking for answers either. I live a simple life, maybe even a boring one, but it is peaceful. And peace is worth more than most people understand. That is why, when Jesse called me and suggested a trip to some little place called Morthlance in France, my first response was a long and deeply disappointed groan. I had no interest in travel, no interest in leaving my routine, and no interest in getting dragged into one of Jesse's influencer adventures. But she was my best friend, and best friends have a dangerous power over your judgment. She could get me to agree to things I would normally reject in seconds. So I said yes, even though every part of me wanted to say no. I was not happy about it, but I was not sure I regretted it either. At least, not yet. Jesse also invited Leslie and Amelia, so the four of us were going together. A few days before the trip, I went over to Jesse's place and found her throwing clothes, shoes, cosmetics, chargers, and half her room into a suitcase. I sat on her bed and watched the chaos. What is even there? I asked. Why are we going to this place? She kept packing without stopping. Oh, I did not tell you? It is this beautiful little town in France. Hills, waterfalls, old streets, cute cafes, pretty views. The whole thing. I raised an eyebrow. Is anything there normal-sized, or is everything small? She paused, looked at me, and smacked my shoulder. You are annoying. I grinned. I know. She went back to packing. Anyway, there is also a haunted spot there. That got my attention. Now that sounds interesting. She waved a hand. Nothing serious. Just one of those spooky places tourists talk about. It is called Morthland's Maison Hantée. Probably one of those fake haunted house places made for fun. Not a real haunting. I hummed and pretended to consider it. My mother texted me at that moment, asking me to buy onions on my way home, which somehow made the whole thing feel even more absurd. Jess, I said, if we are going all the way to France, why are we starting in a random small town? None of us speak French, and you are not exactly famous for good planning. She smacked me again, harder this time. I picked Morthlands because it is trending on Peachy right now. Everybody is posting about it. It is becoming a thing. We will go to Paris later. I already added an extra week there. I rolled my eyes. Of course this is because of social media. She pointed at me dramatically. You complain now, but wait until you are eating French baguettes, croissants, quiche, fancy meat dishes, and all of it for free, because this trip is sponsored. I stared at her. How do you even know all those food names? She straightened proudly. I study too. Thank you very much. I laughed, called her dramatic, and went home, still half convinced the whole trip would be a waste of time. About a week later, the four of us met at Terminal 3 for our international flight. Jessie was excited, Amelia was cheerful, Lisley was chatty, and I was exactly what I always am in airports, sitting quietly with snacks, watching other people stress while I minded my own business. I had arranged 2 weeks off from college, and I had unused annual leave too, so at least I did not have work hanging over my head. The flight took 9 hours. By the time we landed at Charles de Gaulle Airport, it was around 11 at night. After the usual airport procedures, we met the driver arranged by Jessie's sponsor and started the long drive to Morthlands. It took about 3 more hours. By the time we arrived, it was close to 4 in the morning. The hotel stood near the dark shoreline, like something left behind by another century. It was large and beautiful in a cold, old way, with tall windows, stone walls, and the kind of elegance that feels more unsettling than comforting when you see it before dawn. Everything around it was silent, too silent. The sky was still dark. Jessie looked half dead with sleep, walking like a glamorous zombie in expensive clothes. Please wake up for at least 20 minutes, Amelia muttered to her. We dragged our bags inside. The moment I stepped into the lobby, I felt it, not just unease, something heavier. The air smelled wrong, strongly wrong. There was a foul odor hanging around the place, like fish and raw meat left out too long. It turned my stomach at once. You know how some people smell flowers and think of gardens? I smelled that and immediately thought, ghosts. Hello? Lisley said, waving a hand in front of my face. Did you drift away again? Sorry, I said. Do you smell dead protein? She stared at me. Dead what? That smell. Fish. Meat. Rot. She actually leaned forward and sniffed the air seriously, which made me laugh despite myself. You look like a dog when you do that, I said. She frowned at me in annoyance, just as the driver came up behind us. He explained that someone was taking out old animal food supplies or kitchen waste, and that the smell was from that. We turned, and saw a worker carrying a large plastic bag away from a back area, his nose covered. I looked at the driver and said, "So not cannibalism?" He stared at me for 1 second, then burst out laughing. "No, miss," he said. "This hotel has a very good reputation." That was not as comforting as he seemed to think. At the reception desk, Jesse handed over the sponsor documents, but the woman there frowned and said they had no vacancies. Jesse immediately argued, pointed at the booking agreement, and explained that the rooms had already been arranged as part of the sponsorship deal. The staff talked among themselves in rapid French. I understood none of it, but I did briefly feel hopeful. If they truly had no room, maybe we could go somewhere else, somewhere better, somewhere that did not feel like it had a body buried under the foundation. Unfortunately, after a few minutes of discussion, they changed their story. Apparently, they did have a suite available, a 4-room suite with a common room in the center. They apologized, handed over the keys, and told us to wait while it was prepared. That was the moment my heart sank. Our suite was on the 7th floor, number 786. I do not know why that number bothered me instantly, but it did. The suite was laid out almost like a small apartment, with 4 separate bedrooms opening into one shared common space. My room had a beautiful view of the sea. In daylight, it looked almost magical. Endless water, pale sky, the distant shore. It should have made me feel better. It did not. We slept for a few hours and woke up around 9. None of us were in the mood for anything too ambitious, so we decided to spend the day at the beach. "You never told me this hotel was by the beach," I said to Jessie over breakfast. She shrugged. "I forgot. We are literally staying right next to it." "People really do take easy things for granted," I said in my most serious professor voice. She pointed a fork at me. "Stop lecturing me." We all laughed, and for a little while the morning felt normal. The beach was beautiful. We spent hours there. The sea air helped. The sunlight helped. For a little while, the strange feeling faded into the background, and I almost convinced myself I had imagined it all. I came back to the hotel before the others because I wanted some quiet. In the common room of our suite, I had noticed a small shelf of books, and one of them looked like a local history book. That was enough to pull me away from the beach. I am a history professor. Give me old places and old books, and I will always choose the books. On my way down the hall, I noticed 2 bellboys talking quietly and glancing toward our suite. The moment I stepped out where they could see me, they straightened up. I caught the feeling that they had been speaking about us. Since I did not know French, I decided I would record them if I heard them again and translate it later. That thought stayed in the back of my mind. When I got into the common room, the books were not where I remembered them. One, in particular, the history book, was gone. I stood there staring at the shelf, confused. Had someone come in? Had I remembered it wrong? I was certain I had seen it earlier, but I had also slept little and traveled for hours, so I told myself my memory might be playing tricks on me. I spent the rest of the morning reading another book instead. By lunch, the others were back. After lunch, I slept again. Then later in the afternoon, I went out for a walk with Amelia, while Jessie and Leslie stayed behind to watch a movie. The town itself was lovely. That made the whole thing worse. The streets were charming, the air was fresh, and the sea stretched out in peaceful blue-gray layers. I remember Amelia smiling and saying, "See, this place is nice." "It is," I said, "except for the hotel." She looked at me. "You still feel weird about it?" "It is not logical," I admitted. "It just feels wrong." especially our suite. She laughed softly. You are overthinking. Am I? She looked somewhere between middle-aged and old, with the kind of face that tells you she has spent many years observing other people. She greeted us in French at first, then quickly switched when we explained we did not understand. We talked for a while. She was an English teacher in Morthlands and had lived there for decades. She seemed kind and calm. And after some small talk, Amelia mentioned our hotel and the sponsorship that had brought us there. The moment the teacher heard the hotel name, her expression changed. Which suite? She asked. Amelia and I exchanged a quick look. Then I answered, 786. The woman went silent. It was not a normal pause. It was the kind of pause that has weight in it. Finally, she said, very carefully, if they cannot move you tomorrow, you should go to another hotel. A cold feeling returned at once. Why? I asked. What is wrong with it? Meet me here tomorrow, she said. I will explain then. Why not now? She gave me a sad, apologetic smile. Because you still have to spend tonight there. It is better you hear it tomorrow. That answer did not calm me. It made everything worse. I barely spoke on the way back. Amelia looked uneasy too. When we got to the hotel, Jessie and Leslie greeted us cheerfully, but the moment Amelia repeated the woman's warning, they brushed it off. Old local ghost story nonsense. Leslie said, please do not start. Jessie laughed. Just sleep with your doors unlocked, in case someone gets scared. Problem solved. You do not actually believe in this stuff, do you? I opened my mouth and closed it again. The truth is, I live somewhere in the middle. I do not know what I believe. I think there are things in this world we do not understand, but I have never wanted to understand them. I have always preferred not to poke at what should stay quiet. I am tired, I said at last. Wake me for dinner. I went back to my room and sat for a long time, watching the shoreline under the moonlight. It was beautiful. The room itself was almost too quiet. I could barely hear my friends in the suite, which made me wonder if the walls were soundproof. Then I remembered the recording. I took out my phone and listened again to what I had captured from the bellboys. The audio was weak and unclear, but with translation help and repeated listening, I pieced together enough to understand the meaning. One voice said, he should not have done this. They were innocent tourists. Another replied, money takes away humanity. A third voice said something like, that has always been true. Then another line, if I could, I would have told them to leave. And the last one that made my whole body freeze. I hope they are safe tonight. I stared at the screen in silence. For a moment, I could not even think properly. I must have zoned out, because the next time I focused, I noticed the dial pad was open on my phone. I did not even remember opening it. The numbers 7, 8, and 6 were there in front of me, our suite number. On the phone keypad, those numbers matched letters. 7 was PQRS, 8 was TUV, 6 was MNO. It hit me slowly, and then all at once. RUN. I know numbers can line up into words by coincidence. I know that. But in that moment, with all the warnings and that ugly growing feeling in my chest, it did not feel like a coincidence. It felt like the room itself had just whispered at me. I ran out of my room. Jessie looked up at once. Die? What happened? Please, I said, please let us change hotels. Tonight, right now. I was sweating, shaking, almost babbling. Jesse came toward me and held my arms. "Hey, calm down. We will sort it out tomorrow morning. I will call the sponsor first thing, okay? You are fine." Amelia brought me a towel. Leslie fanned me with a folded paper, and for once, did not joke. Eventually, I calmed down enough to breathe normally again. I told myself maybe I was just overtired. Maybe fear had fed on itself until it became bigger than reality. We went down for dinner. I laughed where I was supposed to laugh. I made a few jokes. The food was excellent, which only added to the strange cruelty of the whole place. It is unfair that terrible places can serve such good food. Then came bedtime. Jessie stopped before going into her room. "You sure you are okay sleeping alone? Call me if you need anything, and do not lock the door." I promised I would not. I should have kept the lights on. I know that now, but I cannot sleep with lights on. I thought darkness would help me ignore the fear. If I slept through the night, then morning would come, and I could laugh at myself for being dramatic. Sometime around midnight, I woke up to a soft, steady sound, a rhythm, not loud, just enough to drag me out of sleep. I opened my eyes a little and saw someone standing near the desk with their back to me. For one sleepy second, I thought it was Jessie. "Jess?" I mumbled. The sound stopped. A cold wave ran through me so quickly, it felt like I had been dropped into ice water. I closed my eyes at once and pretended to still be asleep. Then the rhythm started again. I opened my eyes just enough to look toward the bedside table. That was when I realized I had forgotten the salt. It sounds stupid now, maybe, but in the panic of that evening I had told myself I would keep some salt with me, just in case. A childish defense, a meaningless one probably, but I had forgotten it. And the moment I remembered that, I nearly burst into tears. I looked toward the door. It was locked. I know for a fact I had not locked it. I stayed still, completely still. I forced myself to breathe slowly. I told myself not to react, not to move, not to acknowledge anything. Then, I felt a tug on my blanket. A child's voice whispered in French. I should not have understood it. I do not speak French, but I understood every word. "Please, help us, I beg you." I felt something in me crack at that. Fear, yes, but something else too. Grief, maybe. Horror. Helplessness. I kept my body still, but inside I was praying wildly, apologizing to anything that might be listening, asking for morning, asking for mercy. Then came a man's voice, loud, angry. I will not repeat all his words. I do not want to, but I understood those too, even though I should not have. He was screaming at someone, furious, cruel, using the kind of language that carries violence in it before the violence even begins. My fear changed for a moment. It became rage. I teach history. I have read about what men have done to women across centuries. I know the language of power and abuse too well. Hearing that voice, even from something dead, made my blood boil through the fear. I opened my eyes more fully. A little girl had moved back from my bed. She ran toward a woman near the desk, the same figure I had first mistaken for Jessie. The child clung to her and cried for her mother. I watched the scene unfold in pieces, the man shouting, the woman pleading, the child terrified. I do not want to describe every second of it. Some things should stay undescribed. What matters is this. He raised an iron rod and hit the woman in the head. She dropped. Then he turned toward the little girl. I was crying by then. I had pushed myself upright without even realizing it. When he moved as if to strike the child, Something in me snapped completely. I grabbed the glass of water from the bedside table and hurled it at him with all my strength. Of course it did not hit him. It passed right through. But that was enough. All three of them turned and looked at me. At once the light in the room switched on by itself and began flickering violently. Then something black and hard wrapped around my throat. I was lifted, or maybe just pinned. I do not know. I could not breathe. I tried to scream. I think I did scream. The room spun. My chest burned. Then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I was in the common room, half in Jessie's lap. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. Amelia and Lisley were crying too. There were hotel staff around us. The receptionist, the bellboys, the English teacher, and some other guests I did not know. Jessie was holding my face in both hands. "Why did you lock the door, you idiot?" she sobbed. "I did not," I said, though my throat hurt so badly the words came out rough. Amelia wiped her eyes. "You scared us to death." I looked around, confused and weak. My head hurt. My throat hurt. My whole body felt wrong. "Tell me what happened," I said. Jessie took a shaky breath and explained. She had been awake in her room scrolling through her phone. Because she could not sleep, when she noticed the light under my door flickering strangely, she had gone to check on me, then heard me scream. A terrible scream. All of them had heard it. When they tried to get into my room, the door was locked. They had to force it open. They found me unconscious on the bed. My hands were tied to the bed frame. The room was in chaos. Broken glass, furniture knocked over, things thrown around. A complete mess. I stared at her. My hands were tied. Jessie nodded, crying all over again. "I am sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have listened." I told them what I had seen. All of it. The woman, the child, the man, the rod, the voice, the strangling. No one laughed. No one called me dramatic. Even the hotel staff stood there with the kind of faces people wear when they have heard something they already feared. It was only around 3:39 in the morning, but we packed immediately. We left that hotel before sunrise. I did not care where we went as long as it was not there. The English teacher helped us find another hotel, a safer one, and stayed with us until we were settled. Later, she told us the truth. In 1894, in Suite 786, a man murdered his wife and young daughter. He struck the woman in the head with an iron rod and then killed the child the same way. My room had been the exact room where it happened. For years, that suite had been sealed. Staff and locals knew its reputation. People had heard screams there. Lights flickered. Windows opened and shut on their own. Guests in nearby rooms reported the sound of things breaking, a man shouting in French, a child crying, and strange disturbances in the middle of the night. No one wanted that suite used. But Jessie was a wealthy influencer with a strong sponsor deal, and money had persuaded the hotel manager to open the sealed suite again for us. That was what the bellboys had been talking about. That was why the English teacher warned us. That was why the hotel felt wrong from the first second I walked in. We stayed for the rest of the trip, but not in Morthlands and not in that hotel. The others tried to save what they could of the vacation. They went out more than I did. I could not bring myself to do much after that. Cafes, maybe. Quiet streets in daylight, maybe. But the version of me that can easily go anywhere and laugh everything off did not come back from that room. Jessie never pushed me after that. She apologized more times than she needed to. None of it was really her fault. She had chased a trend, She had trusted a sponsor. She had been careless, yes, but not cruel. The hotel staff and management were the ones who knew better. I have not gone out much since coming back. Maybe that sounds dramatic, but fear changes your relationship with the world. Once you see something that should not exist, normal life does not fit the same way again. Doors feel different. Dark rooms feel different. Even sleep feels different. Because now I know how quickly it can be interrupted by something impossible. So believe me when I say this. If a place feels wrong, listen to that feeling. If your gut says no, whether it is about a person or a house or a hotel room or a street, listen. And if the locals warn you, trust them, because sometimes the people who live near danger learn to whisper about it long before outsiders arrive, smiling with cameras and sponsorship deals. And sometimes, if you ignore all the warnings, the past does not stay buried. Sometimes it wakes up and waits for you in the room where it died.